Professor Emily Hawkins stepped into the lecture hall with a sense of familiarity and confidence. She adjusted her blazer, the blue one with the gold buttons, the one that always made her feel polished, sharp, and in control. The day had started early, and as she walked up to the podium at the front of the classroom, she could already feel the weight of her reputation. After years of teaching at Riverwood University, she had earned the respect of her students, and today, like every other day, she felt that power. The lecture hall was full, every seat occupied by eager young faces, all looking to her for guidance. Emily thrived on this. She enjoyed the attention, the knowledge that her students trusted her to lead them through the complexities of modern success. She had become known for her no-nonsense approach, teaching students to see the world as it really was, without the rose-colored glasses of success myths and fairy tales. The truth, she always said, was far more interesting than any sugar-coated version of the world. "Good morning, everyone," Emily said, offering a smile that was warm yet authoritative. She always liked to start her lectures with a touch of personal connection. "Today, we're going to talk about luck and success. Can anyone tell me how much of an impact luck really has in becoming rich or famous?" Several hands shot up in the air, each student eager to offer their opinion. Emily nodded toward a girl in the front row who had raised her hand. "My dad says it's all about hard work," the girl said, her voice filled with certainty. "He believes that lucky people are just people who worked harder than everyone else." Emily's lips curved into a tight smile, but there was a slight tightening of her jaw. "Ah, that's what many people think," she said, her voice smooth and controlled. "Hard work, right? But is that the whole story? Let's explore that." She clicked her remote, and a large image of Elon Musk appeared on the screen behind her. There was a slight ripple through the room as a few students shifted in their seats. Some whispered excitedly to one another. Musk was an icon, after all, the modern-day self-made billionaire that many saw as a shining example of the American dream. "Ah, Elon Musk," Emily said with an edge of sarcasm in her voice, the words dripping with skepticism. "The man some of you probably think is the smartest person alive, right?" She paced slowly across the front of the room, savoring the slight tension in the air. "Did you know that Musk was born into a wealthy family? His father owned an emerald mine in South Africa, and he had access to the best education money could buy. When he started his first company, he had the resources, connections, and a financial cushion that many of you will never have. Musk didn't pull himself up by his bootstraps. He was born with boots already on." The students were all intently focused, writing down every word she said. Emily was in her element, the familiar rhythm of delivering her lecture filling her with confidence. She clicked to the next slide, showing Musk standing next to a shiny Tesla car, looking every bit the successful innovator. "Now everyone thinks Musk invented electric cars," Emily said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "But guess what? Tesla was actually founded by Martin Eberhard and Mark Terpenning. Musk didn't invent anything. He just bought his way in. That's the reality of success. Most people who are labeled as self-made like Musk aren't self-made at all. They're simply the right people in the right place at the right time with the right connections." Emily could see the students nodding along, furiously scribbling down notes. The point was sinking in, and she felt a thrill of satisfaction. This was why she loved teaching. This was why she had built such a strong reputation. She was the professor who told the truth, the one who cut through the myths and illusions that the world wanted to believe about wealth and success. "Does he design rockets?" Emily continued, her voice laced with mockery. "Number. He hires engineers to do that work for him. Musk didn't create SpaceX from scratch. He bought it, and he's taken credit for the hard work of the brilliant engineers who've actually built those rockets." A murmur rippled through the class. Some students looked uncertain, others eager to agree. But in the back of the room, one student, Thomas, shifted in his seat uncomfortably. He was the son of an engineer who worked at SpaceX, and he had heard firsthand from his father just how deeply Musk was involved in the technical challenges at the company. His father had told him stories of Musk staying up late into the night to solve problems, asking questions no one else thought to ask. Thomas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Could his father, who had worked with Musk, be wrong? Or was his professor's view the correct one? SpaceX was built by rocket scientists, Emily continued, oblivious to the unease she had caused in the back of the room. And the idea that Musk understands rocket engineering? It's just part of the myth he's created, a myth that many of you buy into. Thomas remained quiet. Who was he to question the professor? Emily had 3 advanced degrees and over 2 decades of experience. She was a renowned academic, respected and revered by the university and her students. Who was he to challenge her views? Emily went on, now fully energized by the flow of her lecture. Let's break it down. Success comes from 3 key ingredients. 1, being born into wealth. 2, being in the right place at the right time. And 3, being a good storyteller. That's how you build a brand like Elon Musk's. It's all about the narrative you create around yourself. She paused for effect, taking a sip of her coffee as she let the students absorb her words. Take PayPal, she said. Musk didn't create the technology that made PayPal successful. He was simply there when it took off. Pure luck. And that's the truth about success. Hard work alone won't make you a billionaire. As she finished speaking, Emily felt a wave of satisfaction. She had delivered her message with precision, and the students had received it with enthusiasm. She clicked to her final slide, showing the famous quote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." Even this quote gets it wrong, Emily said, shaking her head. For the ultra-successful, luck is simply what happens when privilege meets more privilege. The class erupted into laughter, and Emily felt a rush of pride. This was why students flocked to her class every semester. They didn't want to hear the same tired stories about self-made billionaires. They wanted the truth, and she was more than happy to give it to them. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Emily gathered her things and packed up her notes, still basking in the glow of her successful lecture. She didn't notice the 2 men who had entered the classroom earlier, slipping quietly out the door. One of them was the dean, and the other was a man she had not recognized. She was too focused on the praise from her students, the hum of approval that filled the room as they gathered their things. But as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed with a text message from Dean Carter. "Please come to my office after class. Important." Emily frowned. The dean rarely contacted her directly. She was a popular professor with a solid reputation, and she rarely needed to meet him unless there were budgetary concerns. "Probably about the department budget again?" she muttered under her breath. She walked across campus, smiling at the students who greeted her. It was a good day. Her confidence was high, and she was eager to continue challenging the myths about success. What she didn't know was that her worldview was about to be turned upside down. The following morning, Emily found herself walking across campus with a strange sense of unease that she couldn't quite place. It wasn't the usual feeling of self-assurance she had when walking into her office. Today she was distracted, her thoughts still lingering on the lecture she had given yesterday. While the class had responded enthusiastically to her arguments about privilege and luck, a small part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. What if she was wrong? She paused to collect her thoughts before continuing on to the administration building, where Dean Carter had requested her presence. As she approached the door to his office, she couldn't help but wonder why he wanted to meet with her. Maybe it had something to do with the donor issue. Riverwood University had been facing budget cuts, and professors like her, who ran high-profile courses, were often called in to help with fundraising. The door to the dean's office opened, and Emily walked inside. Dean Carter greeted her with his usual warmth, but today his expression seemed slightly more serious. "Professor Hawkins, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Emily sat down, her mind racing as she wondered what this meeting might be about. She had already been briefed about the budget cuts, and with her reputation in the department, she had expected a routine discussion. But the dean's mood suggested otherwise. "As you know," Dean Carter began, "Riverwood is committed to fostering a diverse and intellectually rigorous learning environment. Your class on success has been instrumental in challenging students to think critically about their futures. I'm proud of the way you're teaching them to understand privilege in today's society." Emily smiled, grateful for the recognition, but she couldn't help but feel that the conversation was leading somewhere unexpected. "That's why," the dean continued, "I wanted to introduce you to someone who's been paying attention to your work, Victor Chen." At the mention of the name, Emily's eyebrows shot up. She hadn't heard of Victor Chen before, but the dean seemed to have a certain respect for him, so she didn't question it immediately. The man who entered next caught her completely off guard. He wasn't someone she had expected, nor was he the type of visitor she was used to. Victor Chen was a man in his 50s, dressed in an expensive but casual suit, something that screamed business professional, but not too formal. He had a composed demeanor, his face sharp and intelligent, though there was a subtle glint in his eyes that made Emily uneasy. "Professor Hawkins," Victor said with a pleasant smile, offering his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Victor Chen from the Future Minds Foundation. I've been following your work with great interest." Emily shook his hand, her curiosity piqued. "I'm not sure I understand," she said cautiously. "What's the Future Minds Foundation?" Victor sat down, adjusting his suit jacket before answering. "We identify exceptional young minds across the country and help them reach their potential. Our mission is to provide resources and support that they wouldn't necessarily have access to through traditional channels. In your lecture yesterday, you discussed the role of privilege and success, how most billionaires, like Elon Musk, are just beneficiaries of their privilege rather than exceptional talent. I wanted to talk with you about that perspective." Emily was taken aback. She had been certain that Musk, like other successful billionaires, owed his rise to privilege and luck, not to any extraordinary intellectual ability. "I believe it's critical that students understand how systems of privilege shape success," she said, her tone firm. "People like Musk are born into wealth, and most of their success comes from their access to resources, things ordinary people don't have." Victor nodded thoughtfully, but Emily could tell that he wasn't fully agreeing with her. "You're not wrong in what you're saying. Privilege definitely plays a large role in success, but I believe there's more to the story. Musk's achievements are not solely because of his financial background. There's something unique about his mind, something that goes beyond what most people would define as luck." Emily felt a tightening in her chest. She didn't like where this was going. "Are you saying that Musk's success was not just a result of his privilege, but of his own exceptional abilities?" she asked, already knowing the answer she didn't want to hear. Victor leaned forward, his expression serious. "I believe it's important for you to reconsider your view. There's more to Musk than the narrative people like to tell about him. Would you be open to seeing some of the information I have on him? It might offer you a different perspective." Before Emily could respond, he placed a small USB drive on the desk between them. It was simple, unassuming, just a small, silver device with a blue light on the end. But Emily felt a strange unease at the sight of it. Why had Victor chosen to meet with her about Musk? What was it he wanted to prove? "I'm not saying you're wrong," Victor said, sensing her hesitation. "I'm simply offering you the opportunity to see something that could broaden your perspective. We've collected data on Musk's early life, his test scores, and his personal journals, things that aren't available to the public. These documents might make you reconsider your position." Emily stared at the USB drive, her fingers hovering over it. "Where did you get this information?" she asked, her voice cautious. Victor smiled but didn't immediately answer. "My foundation has connections with several organizations, including educational institutions, and we track exceptional individuals. The data we've compiled is confidential but highly accurate. If you'd like, I can explain the details more when you've had time to review it." Emily glanced at Dean Carter, who nodded slightly, giving her an encouraging look. Despite her skepticism, the offer was intriguing, but there was something about the way Victor spoke that made her uneasy, like he was leading her down a path she wasn't sure she wanted to walk. "I'll review it," Emily said slowly, taking the USB drive from Victor's hand. "But I won't promise anything." Victor's smile widened. "That's all I ask. I believe that once you see the information, you'll understand. Let's meet again tomorrow at the campus coffee shop. I'll be in town until tomorrow evening." After the meeting, Emily found herself still holding the USB drive as she walked back to her office. Her thoughts were a swirl of uncertainty. What if Musk was different from what she had believed? What if there was more to his success than she had accounted for? As she sat at her desk, Emily couldn't help but feel a growing curiosity, despite her initial resistance. She didn't like being told that her long-held beliefs might be wrong, but a part of her wondered, could there be more to the story? She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that maybe she had been too quick to dismiss Musk's intellect and perseverance. Her fingers hovered over the computer mouse, but instead of getting back to work as she had intended, she plugged the USB drive into her laptop. The files that appeared on the screen seemed too personal, too intimate, but Emily had always prided herself on being open to new ideas. She clicked on the first folder labeled Early Education, not knowing that this would be the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about success. Back in her office, Emily sat in front of her laptop, the small USB drive Victor had given her resting on the desk in front of her. She stared at it for a moment, her mind racing with uncertainty. What was she about to uncover? Could this really change the way she had viewed Elon Musk for so many years? She had always prided herself on being a rational person, someone who based her opinions on facts and data. But what if this information Victor had given her was more than just another piece of propaganda from a billionaire's PR machine? Could she really trust it? Her fingers hovered over the mouse, hesitating as her mind ran through the consequences of what it would mean if the information was true. After a moment, Emily took a deep breath and clicked on the first folder. It was labeled Early Education. The screen flickered briefly as it opened, revealing a scan of an official SAT report. At the top was a name, Elon Musk. Her heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had been dreading. Could this really be real? She read the scores carefully. 800 in math, almost perfect in verbal, a score that placed Musk in the top 0.1% of test takers nationwide. But at the bottom of the report, there was a note that sent a chill down her spine. Possible cheating, retake recommended. Emily frowned. Possible cheating? That was an odd detail to include, especially in a formal academic document. She clicked to the next file, which was labeled Retake Report. This one was more official looking, a scanned copy of a follow-up SAT report, and there was a note that immediately caught her attention. No evidence of cheating found. Scores verified. Emily leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of the situation settle over her. These weren't the kinds of scores she had expected to see. She had always dismissed Musk's intelligence as being average, nothing exceptional. But this was different. These scores weren't just good, they were extraordinary. The kinds of scores that came from someone with a natural aptitude for problem solving. Someone who could think in ways that most people couldn't even begin to comprehend. Her mind raced as she clicked on the next folder, which was labeled IQ tests. A child's IQ test result popped up on the screen, and Emily's eyes scanned the document. Again, the name at the top was Elon Musk. The score was off the charts, placing Musk in the top 0.1% of the population, with a focus on spatial reasoning and problem-solving abilities that were noted as extraordinary. Emily's pulse quickened. She had never expected to find something like this. Evidence of brilliance that she had always argued Musk lacked. How could she have missed this? The idea that someone like Musk could have an IQ that high was at odds with everything she had believed. To her, Musk had always seemed like the product of money and privilege, nothing more. But these documents, these tests, showed something different. They were concrete evidence that Musk's intellectual abilities were not just above average, but truly exceptional. Was this really the same man she had criticized in front of hundreds of students? The same man she had written off as nothing more than a lucky opportunist? Emily clicked through more files, each one offering a deeper look into Musk's life. There were early programming projects Musk had completed as a teenager, codes written in BASIC that demonstrated a deep understanding of technology and programming far beyond his age. There were college papers showing a sophisticated grasp of physics and engineering concepts, each one accompanied by notes from professors praising his insight and understanding. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she clicked on the final folder, which was labeled Personal Journals. The thought of reading someone's private thoughts felt intrusive, even unethical, but these files had been provided to her, and she had promised herself to remain open-minded. She opened the first journal entry, dated when Musk was around 10 years old. The words on the screen were raw, unpolished, a young boy trying to make sense of his world. Kids at school pushed me down the stairs today. They called me a freak because I talked about space too much. Mom says I shouldn't tell Dad, or he'll get angry at them. I don't understand why they hate me. I just want to learn about rockets. Emily swallowed hard. This was the first glimpse she had into Musk's childhood, And it wasn't the story of a pampered, privileged child that she had expected. This was a story of loneliness, bullying, and isolation. A young boy who was clearly obsessed with space and science, but who was rejected by his peers for simply being different. The next entry was from a few years later, when Musk was in high school. Built my first computer program today. Dad says it was a waste of time, but I stayed up all night to finish it. It works. No one cares but me, but it works. Emily's heart tightened as she read those words. Musk wasn't just a privileged man who stumbled into success. He was someone who had faced challenges, who had been dismissed, who had fought to prove himself. This wasn't the narrative she had been presenting to her students. She had dismissed Musk's early struggles, ignoring the fact that he had fought for his passion and spent hours working on problems that no one else around him cared about. She had assumed that his success had been handed to him, but it was clear now that there had been more to his journey. As she clicked through more journal entries, she began to see the pattern. Musk was driven by an insatiable curiosity, an obsession with solving problems, and an ability to keep going even when faced with failure. There was no sign of the lucky billionaire who just happened to be in the right place at the right time. There was only the story of someone who had fought for his success, who had used his intelligence and determination to overcome the obstacles in his way. Emily closed the laptop, feeling the weight of what she had just read. It was more than just a collection of files. It was a narrative that shattered the worldview she had so carefully constructed over the years. Musk wasn't just lucky. He wasn't just a man born into privilege. He was someone who had worked relentlessly, who had faced rejection and failure, and who had used his intelligence to solve problems that no one else had even thought to tackle. As she sat there staring at the closed laptop, Emily felt a sinking feeling in her chest. Everything she had taught her students, everything she had believed about success, was suddenly in question. She had built her career on the idea that privilege and luck were the primary drivers of success. But now, as she faced the evidence in front of her, she realized that her beliefs had been incomplete. There was more to success than she had been willing to admit. A quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered a question she had never allowed herself to ask. What if you're wrong? Emily took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. She had always prided herself on being open-minded, on being willing to challenge the status quo. But this was different. How could she reconcile the image of Musk she had painted for her students with the man who had struggled, failed, and fought his way to success? Her phone buzzed with a reminder for her meeting with Victor the next day, and Emily realized that she had to confront the truth. She couldn't continue to ignore the evidence. She couldn't ignore the possibility that she had been wrong all along. The following morning, Emily arrived at the small campus coffee shop earlier than usual. She had spent the entire night going through the files Victor had given her, and every time she closed her eyes, the image of Musk's SAT scores, his IQ tests, and the journal entries flashed before her. She had spent years teaching her students that the ultra-successful, especially the billionaires like Musk, had merely capitalized on their privilege. She had argued that wealth and influence were the primary drivers of success, not exceptional ability. But now, after reading the files, she wasn't so sure. Musk's early years, his isolation, his obsession with space, his struggles with other kids at school, painted a picture of someone who wasn't handed his success. This wasn't the story of someone lucky enough to be born into the right family. This was the story of someone who had faced setbacks and rejection, but kept pushing forward. It was a narrative that Emily had never considered in her carefully constructed worldview. She sat down at a corner table, her fingers tapping nervously against her coffee cup as she waited for Victor. The coffee shop was quiet this early in the morning, and the stillness allowed Emily to gather her thoughts. She felt conflicted. On one hand, she had always prided herself on teaching her students the importance of questioning the world around them. But on the other, she had built her entire academic career on a theory that was now being tested. Was it possible she had been wrong all along? A few minutes later, Victor entered the coffee shop, scanning the room before his eyes landed on Emily. He smiled and made his way over to her. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the turmoil she was feeling inside. As he sat down, he didn't immediately speak, sensing her unease. "Good morning, Professor," Victor said smoothly, his voice friendly but filled with an underlying intensity. "I trust you had a chance to look through the files." Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the table in front of her. She didn't know where to start. The revelation was so overwhelming that it almost felt like a betrayal. I don't know what to think anymore," she said, her voice quiet. "I've spent years teaching my students that success comes from privilege and luck, that the odds are stacked against most people. And yet, when I look at the evidence you've provided, I see something completely different. Musk's intelligence, it's undeniable." Victor leaned back in his chair, observing her closely. "And what do you think that means?" Emily took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "It means that my entire view on success, everything I've been telling my students, might be wrong. Musk isn't just some lucky guy who happened to be born into the right family. He's someone who had exceptional ability, someone who was willing to work through the tough times. And that changes everything I thought I knew about success." Victor didn't immediately respond. He let her words sink in, allowing the weight of the realization to settle in. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm and deliberate. "I'm glad you're starting to see the bigger picture. Musk's journey wasn't just about money or connections. It was about vision, perseverance, and yes, a rare kind of intelligence. But that doesn't mean he didn't have challenges, like the bullying he faced as a child, the doubts he had about his own worth. But the key was that he didn't let those things stop him. He was relentless." Emily swallowed hard. She hadn't known how deeply Musk had struggled in his early years. She had assumed he was just another privileged billionaire who had found a way to skate through life. But what she was discovering was that success was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. "Why are you showing me this?" Emily asked. "What do you want from me, Victor? Why is it so important that I change my perspective on Musk?" Victor's expression softened slightly, as if understanding the conflict inside her. "It's not just about Musk. It's about understanding that there are exceptional minds out there. People who don't fit the traditional narrative. People who have been overlooked or underestimated simply because they didn't come from the right background. My foundation seeks to identify those minds and help nurture them." Emily's eyes flickered. "So what? You want me to tell my students that anyone can become successful if they're just smart enough? That all they need is the right kind of intelligence? Like Musk's?" Victor smiled, but his expression was thoughtful. "Not exactly. What I'm saying is that success isn't as simple as we make it out to be. It's not just about privilege, and it's not just about intelligence. It's about a combination of things. Opportunity, yes, but also a mindset, resilience, and the willingness to push through adversity. That's what we need to help students recognize. It's about breaking down the myths around success." Emily leaned forward, her mind racing. "But the whole point of my teaching is that success is a system built on privilege. If I start telling my students that success also comes from talent and perseverance, I'm contradicting everything I've been saying for the past 20 years. Victor's gaze softened. "I don't think you're contradicting yourself, Professor. I think you're evolving. The system you've been talking about is real. It's undeniable that privilege plays a major role in success. But there are other factors at play. And when you understand those factors, when you recognize that some people succeed, not just because of privilege, but because of an unrelenting drive to succeed, you start to see the world differently. And when you start to see the world differently, you can teach your students to see it differently too." Emily sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing Victor's words. She had always believed that she was giving her students the truth, the raw, unvarnished reality of the world. But now she was realizing that the truth was far more complex than she had ever imagined. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice quieter than before. "What do you want me to do with this information? How am I supposed to teach my students now?" Victor smiled gently. "I'm not asking you to abandon your principles. I'm asking you to expand them. What you're teaching your students is important, but it's only part of the story. You have the chance to give them a more complete picture, one that acknowledges privilege, yes, but also shows them the power of the human mind, the drive, and the ability to overcome." Emily exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her chest. She had spent so many years teaching her students that success was out of their reach, that it was a product of luck and privilege. But now faced with the undeniable truth that some people, like Musk, achieve greatness not because of luck, but because of a combination of intelligence, vision, and persistence, Emily felt a profound sense of unease. She had built her career on a lie, on a simplified view of success that didn't take into account the deeper complexities of human potential. But could she change everything she had taught for so long? "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need time." Victor nodded, standing up as if he expected nothing less. "Of course. Take all the time you need, Professor. But remember, the best teachers are the ones who are always willing to question their own beliefs. You've already done that in your classroom with your students. Now it's time to do it for yourself." The days following her meeting with Victor were a blur of conflicting thoughts. Emily found herself waking up earlier than usual, unable to sleep soundly through the night. The files she had reviewed, the SAT scores, the IQ tests, the journal entries, continued to replay in her mind, each detail forcing her to confront the uncomfortable truth that Musk's success wasn't just about privilege. She had always believed that success in the modern world was a simple equation: wealth plus opportunity equals success. But now, in the face of the evidence, she couldn't ignore that some people had achieved greatness because of something more, something that went beyond mere chance. Sitting at her desk in her office, Emily began sifting through her lecture notes for success in the modern world. As she read through her carefully crafted points on how the wealthy and successful were simply lucky, her stomach turned. The words on the page felt increasingly hollow. She had been teaching her students that the system was rigged, that success was out of their control, that they had little chance against the forces of privilege. But now Emily wasn't so sure. If success was about more than just privilege, if there was a place for talent, intelligence, and drive, then her entire framework needed to change. She opened her laptop and began typing. It wasn't easy. Emily had spent over 20 years building a career around the idea that success was predetermined by wealth and connections. To shift that perspective felt like a betrayal of her own identity. But as she typed out new lecture slides, outlining a more nuanced understanding of success, a sense of clarity started to emerge. She still believed that privilege was a powerful factor in success. She could never deny that. But she had also seen now that intelligence, perseverance, and a unique mindset played crucial roles. There were people like Musk and many others who didn't fit neatly into her earlier theories. They were the exceptions. Exceptional minds who saw the world differently and weren't afraid to fight for their place in it. The words flowed more easily now. She typed about intelligence that went beyond conventional measures, about the power of persistence, about failure as a stepping stone rather than an obstacle. She wrote about how success wasn't just handed to those who were born into wealth. It was built by those who were willing to work relentlessly, to face adversity, and to keep pushing forward when everyone else had given up. Once the new slides were ready, Emily sat back in her chair, reading through them one last time. She wasn't sure if she was ready to present these changes to her students. It felt like a big step, like stepping out of her own comfort zone, but she knew she had to. The next day, Emily stood in front of her class, the lecture hall once again packed with students. They were eager, as always, for her take on the world, ready to hear her insights on how to navigate the complex web of success and failure. But today, Emily was different. Today, she wasn't the confident, unshakable professor they were used to. Today, she was someone who was questioning her own beliefs, someone who was still processing what it meant to redefine success. "Good morning, everyone," Emily said, her voice calm but different from usual. She paused, looking at the students before her. "Today, we're going to talk about success, but not in the way we usually do." The class fell silent, and Emily could feel the eyes of every student on her, waiting for her to begin. She felt a lump in her throat, but she pressed forward. "I've spent years teaching you that success is mostly about luck and privilege, that some people are born into the right circumstances, and that's what sets them apart. I still believe that privilege plays a major role in success," she began, the words feeling both familiar and foreign. "But there's more to the story, much more." She clicked to the first slide, which showed a quote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." She paused before continuing. "I've always told you that this quote was wrong, that success for the ultra-wealthy is simply a product of privilege. But now I see that it's not the whole truth. Yes, privilege matters, but there are also exceptional minds, people who succeed because of their intellect, their vision, and their persistence. The class murmured quietly, confused but intrigued. Emily clicked to the next slide, which now displayed a photo of Elon Musk. She felt a little uneasy showing his image again after everything she had learned, but she knew she needed to address it. I used to think Musk's success was just a product of his wealth, his family's money, his connections. But now I see there's more to his story. He didn't just buy into Tesla or SpaceX. He worked relentlessly to build those companies, even when faced with failure. He failed multiple times, but he didn't give up. That's something I didn't fully appreciate before. She looked around the room at the faces of her students. They were listening more intently than she had seen in a long time, a mix of curiosity and confusion in their expressions. Emily knew they weren't used to hearing her speak like this, but she was committed to showing them a more complex picture of success. I want you to understand that success isn't just about luck or privilege. It's about perseverance. It's about the willingness to keep going when things get tough. It's about learning from failure and not letting it define you. It's about exceptional minds who see solutions where others see problems. She paused again, feeling the weight of what she was saying. For the first time, she felt like she was truly challenging the students to think for themselves, to question the simple narratives that she had presented them with for so long. But I also want you to understand that success isn't equally accessible to everyone, she added, her voice softening. We still live in a world where privilege plays a significant role in who gets ahead. But that doesn't mean success is impossible for everyone. It just means the road is harder for some than others. A few students raised their hands, eager to ask questions. Emily called on a young man in the front row, his face full of uncertainty. Professor, are you saying that hard work is all that matters? Emily smiled softly. No, I'm not saying that. Hard work is important, but it doesn't guarantee success. There are too many factors: privilege, timing, opportunity. But exceptional minds don't wait for the right moment. They create it, and that's what I want you to understand. As she wrapped up the lecture, Emily felt a sense of relief. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step towards something new. She had taken the first step in changing how she thought about success, and, more importantly, how she would teach her students moving forward. After class, as the students filed out, Emily stayed behind, looking over her notes. The changes were small, but they were meaningful. She knew there was still a lot of work ahead, a lot more to rethink and reshape in her lectures. But she felt something shift inside her, a sense of hope perhaps, or a new kind of excitement. For the first time in years, Emily was truly open to learning, and that was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. The weeks that followed Emily's lecture on success felt like a blur. It was as though a fog had lifted, and she was seeing everything with a new clarity. Her lectures had become more nuanced, more reflective. The students, too, had picked up on the change. They were asking questions, pushing back, and challenging her ideas in ways that made Emily feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. She had been teaching for over 2 decades, but for the first time, Emily felt that her classroom wasn't just a place for her to impart knowledge. It was a space where everyone, including her, was learning. Her students were no longer just passive recipients of information. They were active participants in a dialogue about what success really meant. And that dialogue was changing her too. As she walked across campus one afternoon, Emily reflected on the conversation she had had with Victor Chen. He had told her that good teachers were always willing to question their own beliefs, to evolve and adapt. She had resisted that idea at first, afraid that questioning her own convictions would be a sign of weakness. But now she understood what Victor had meant. The ability to evolve, to challenge assumptions, even her own, was not a sign of insecurity. It was a sign of strength, of intellectual honesty. Emily had incorporated new elements into her lectures, talking more about the power of perseverance and grit, about how failure could be a stepping stone to success rather than a sign of defeat. She'd even started telling her students about Elon Musk, not as a cautionary tale or a myth, but as a complex person who had faced adversity, who had failed, and who had kept going. And the more she shared Musk's story with her students, the more she realized that his success wasn't just about luck. It was about his ability to keep moving forward, to learn from his mistakes, and to stay focused on his long-term goals. But even with all the progress she had made in her thinking, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to learn. She had started reading other biographies, other stories of people who had overcome the odds to achieve greatness. There was a pattern, a common thread that ran through them all. A willingness to fail, to keep pushing forward even when the path was unclear. One morning after her early class, Emily made her way to the small campus garden, a quiet spot she often retreated to when she needed to think. As she sat on one of the stone benches, she pulled out her notebook, scribbling down ideas for her next lecture. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and for the first time in weeks, she felt at peace. "Professor?" Emily looked up and saw Marco Martinez standing before her, a big grin on his face. Marco had been one of her quieter students at the start of the semester, but since the shift in her teaching, he had become more engaged, more confident. His eyes were brighter, his posture more upright. Emily had noticed the change in him, and it was one of the most rewarding aspects of her own transformation. "Hi, Marco," Emily said, smiling back. "What's up?" "I just wanted to thank you," Marco said, sitting down next to her on the bench. "For starting the Rocket Club. It's been life-changing." Emily was taken aback. "I didn't do much. You all did the work. You've got the passion, the drive." Marco shook his head, his grin widening. "You gave us the opportunity, the belief, and that's what we needed. You told us that failure is just a part of the process, and that's what I've been telling myself every time something goes wrong. I mean, look at the club. We've come so far. We're getting better every week." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had never imagined that something as simple as starting a student club could have such a profound impact on a group of young people. "I'm proud of you, Marco. You and the others are the ones who are making it happen." Marco's expression grew serious, and he looked at her with a new kind of respect. "It's not just about the rockets, Professor. It's about what we can do. You've shown us that we don't have to be like everyone else. We can think outside the box. And if we fail, that doesn't mean we're done. It just means we keep trying." Emily was stunned by his words. She had given her students the tools to think critically, to question systems, to challenge their assumptions. But she hadn't expected them to be so deeply impacted by the message of persistence, of resilience. She hadn't expected them to take that lesson to heart in such a profound way. "You're right, Marco," Emily said softly. "It's not about the rockets. It's about what you all can create. The world needs people who think differently, who see problems in new ways. And you're doing that. You're showing what happens when exceptional minds are given the right opportunities." Marco beamed. "We're just getting started. We've got big plans for next semester. We want to apply for the state competition, and, he hesitated, glancing around as though making sure no one was listening. "We might even be able to get some support from the engineering department. We've got a meeting with them next week." Emily smiled warmly. "That's fantastic. You're all making progress." "I just wanted to say thanks," Marco repeated, "for believing in us." The gratitude in his voice left Emily speechless. She had started the Rocket Club as a way to engage with her students, to give them something hands-on to work toward. But in the process, she had realized that the club was more than just a project. It was a symbol of what could happen when students were given the space to dream, to fail, and to succeed on their own terms. Marco was a perfect example of that. As Marco stood to leave, he gave her a quick, grateful nod. "I'll see you later, Professor. We've got work to do." Emily watched him walk away, a quiet pride filling her chest. She had always believed that success was something determined by external factors, luck, privilege, connections. But now she saw that success was something that could be shaped by internal factors as well: determination, vision, and the courage to keep moving forward despite failure. As she sat in the garden, Emily realized that she had learned something truly profound. Success was not about being handed opportunities. It was about taking the opportunities that came your way, no matter how small, and using them to create something extraordinary. It was a lesson she would continue to pass on to her students, and one she would continue to apply to her own life. Weeks passed, and Emily found herself standing at the edge of a new chapter, both in her personal and professional life. The transformation that had begun with a single conversation with Victor Chen was now palpable in every aspect of her teaching. She had, against all odds, become someone who no longer simply recited facts. She was now a teacher who encouraged her students to question everything, including her own teachings. Her classroom had become a place of collaboration, a space where the students weren't just listening to her voice, but also learning from one another's perspectives. Her new approach wasn't without its challenges, of course. She still faced internal resistance at times, the echoes of old beliefs tugging at her. The system was designed to favor the privileged, she reminded herself. That fact had never changed, but now she could see more clearly than before. Success wasn't only for the lucky few born into the right families. Exceptional people often rose to the top because of their own unique abilities, persistence, and vision. It wasn't a simple equation anymore. As the semester came to a close, Emily sat in her office reviewing the final grades for her students. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind, with her classes engaging in more lively debates than ever before. Her students, once passive in their learning, were now fully active participants, diving deep into the nuances of success. The discussions were thoughtful, open-minded, and sometimes even challenging. For the first time, she felt like the students were truly learning, not just regurgitating facts, but actually analyzing and questioning the world around them. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, surprised to see an email from Marco. Subject: Rocket Club update. We need your help. Emily smiled as she clicked open the message. It was clear that the Rocket Club had taken on a life of its own, and it made her proud to see that Marco and the others were so invested in it. Over the past month, the club had grown exponentially. What had started as a small group of students working together to build model rockets was now a full-fledged team, with students from various departments volunteering to help with everything from engineering to business development. The email was a request for advice on how to refine their current rocket design for an upcoming state competition. Emily's heart warmed at the thought of how far they had come. She had always thought of herself as someone who dispensed knowledge, but now she was witnessing her students take charge of their own learning, using the resources and support she had provided to create something tangible. They were teaching themselves, pushing their own limits, and testing the very boundaries of their potential. It was everything she had hoped for when she started the club. She quickly typed out a response. Marco, I'm so proud of all the progress the club has made. The designs look great, and I can see how much thought and effort you all have put into this project. As for the competition, I think the next step is refining your propulsion system. You mentioned some issues with the stability of the first test model. Have you considered testing different configurations for the thrusters? I can help you connect with some of the engineering faculty if you need any additional support. Keep up the great work. I'm excited to see where this takes you all. Professor Hawkins Emily sent the email and leaned back in her chair, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, she had been so certain of her own views on success. Now she was seeing firsthand the power of belief, both in herself and in her students. They were proving that intelligence and potential didn't just come from privilege, they came from within, from a willingness to learn, to fail, and to persevere. That afternoon, Emily found herself sitting in the university's cafe, enjoying a cup of coffee while reviewing her notes for the next lecture. As she sipped, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a reminder about her meeting with Victor Chen tomorrow. The thought of meeting him again filled her with a mix of gratitude and hesitation. It had been several weeks since their last conversation, and while Emily had been processing all of the new insights she had gained from the files, she hadn't yet decided what to do with that information. Would she continue to teach the more nuanced version of success that she had introduced to her students? Or would she find a way to incorporate even more of the exceptional mind's perspective into her lessons? She had come to believe that people like Musk weren't just the lucky few, but she was still figuring out how to integrate that new understanding into her larger teaching philosophy. Her mind wandered back to the Rocket Club. It felt like a turning point for both her students and herself. They were starting to see the world differently. They weren't just trying to build rockets. They were building their futures, learning how to solve real-world problems and developing the skills that would help them succeed in whatever paths they chose. She wondered how many other students on campus were just waiting for the right opportunity, the right push, to unlock their own potential. That evening, Emily revisited the documents Victor had given her, rereading the files on Musk one more time. The personal journals, the test scores, the early programming projects, it all painted a picture of a man who had not only been exceptionally talented, but also fiercely determined. Emily had always known that people like Musk didn't reach the heights they did simply by playing it safe. But now she saw that it wasn't just luck. It was a combination of intelligence, vision, and an unyielding work ethic. The more she read, the more she realized that it wasn't just Musk who had been extraordinary. There were countless others like him, people who had faced failure and rejection, but who had continued to fight for their place in the world. Success wasn't just about being born into the right circumstances. It was about creating opportunities, learning from setbacks, and refusing to give up when the world told you to quit. As she closed her laptop and prepared to head home, Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had always believed that she was teaching her students how to navigate the complexities of success. But now she realized that they had taught her something just as important. That success wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one that was shaped by both the external forces of the world and the internal drive of those who refused to be defined by them. The next morning, Emily found herself walking to the campus coffee shop once again. She hadn't seen Victor Chen since their last meeting, and now with the state competition around the corner and her new approach to teaching taking root in the classroom, she was both eager and apprehensive about seeing him again. Their previous conversation had left her with a mixture of uncertainty and anticipation. She had opened herself up to new ideas, but how much of it was she really ready to integrate into her own worldview? How much of her identity as a teacher could she reshape before it all became too overwhelming? Victor was already seated when she arrived, a coffee cup in front of him, his eyes glinting with curiosity. As always, he seemed calm and collected, as if he already knew the answers to the questions she hadn't yet fully formulated in her mind. Emily couldn't help but wonder how he seemed to always be one step ahead. "Good morning, Professor," Victor greeted her as she sat down. "I trust the semester has been going well." Emily smiled, though there was a trace of fatigue in her eyes. "It's been a challenge, but I think it's going well. The students are more engaged, more curious. It feels different this time." "That's good to hear," Victor said, his smile never wavering. "How are you feeling about the changes you've made?" Emily took a deep breath, staring into her coffee cup as she gathered her thoughts. "It's been harder than I thought it would be," she admitted. "I've always prided myself on being someone who gives my students the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. But now I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about success. And I'm not sure if I'm ready for all of this." Victor nodded, his expression serious but understanding. "Change is never easy, especially when it challenges the foundation of what you spent your career building. But that's exactly why I wanted to meet with you again. You've come a long way, Professor Hawkins. You're on the path to understanding something deeper." Emily looked up, locking eyes with him. "I've been revising my lectures. I've been teaching my students that success is a combination of luck, privilege, and exceptional intelligence. But now I'm seeing that it's more than that. It's about resilience, vision, and the ability to fail forward. And it's not just about who has the most money or the most connections. There are people who, despite their disadvantages, still find a way to make it." Victor leaned forward, his interest piqued. "And what about Musk?" Emily hesitated. "I still don't know where he fits into all of this. He's been such a focal point of my teaching. I've criticized him for being lucky, for using his family's wealth to buy into his ventures. But I can't ignore what I've learned about him. His early failures, his drive, his genius, those things were never part of the narrative I told. It's like I've been seeing him through a distorted lens all along." Victor smiled, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. "I think you're beginning to see the whole picture now. Musk is an example, but he's also just one story. There are many more like him. People who come from different backgrounds, people who face challenges, people who may not fit the typical mold of success, but who rise because of their unique abilities. That's the reality that the world often overlooks." Emily sighed deeply, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. It's not just about Musk, though, is it? It's about everything I've been teaching. I've spent years talking about how success is out of reach for most people, how it's shaped by privilege and external factors. But now I'm seeing that success doesn't just come from privilege. It also comes from within. And that's terrifying. If I teach my students this new reality, what does that mean for everything I've said before? Victor watched her closely, his gaze steady. It means that you've evolved. It means you've taken the next step in your own journey. And that's the role of a true teacher, isn't it? To learn as much from your students as they learn from you, to be open to new ideas, to be willing to adapt. Your students will respect you more for it because they'll see that you're not just spouting what's been handed down to you. You're showing them how to think for themselves, to examine the evidence and make their own conclusions. Emily's thoughts were spinning. For so long, she had been certain that success was about being in the right place at the right time, that the system was rigged for those born into wealth. But what if she had been wrong? What if the real power of success was not only about external factors, but about people having the audacity to dream, to push boundaries and to fight for what they wanted, no matter the odds? Victor, Emily said slowly, looking at him with a new sense of clarity, I want to keep pushing forward. I want to continue challenging my students, but I also want to help them see that their dreams aren't impossible, that the systems may be rigged, but they don't have to be defined by them. I want to teach them that success is something they can shape for themselves. Victor's smile widened. I knew you'd get there. And it's not just about changing your curriculum, it's about changing lives. You're giving your students the tools to recognize their own potential, to believe in themselves. That's the first step. Emily felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the right path. The old narrative she had clung to, the one that said success was a privilege only for the lucky few, had begun to crumble. And in its place, something new was emerging. It wasn't just about the system. It was about the people within it, the ones who, despite the odds, refused to let anything stand in their way. She looked up at Victor, determination in her eyes. I'm ready to make the change, to teach my students what I truly believe, that success isn't just about privilege, it's about potential. It's about hard work, perseverance, and vision. And no matter where they start from, they have the power to shape their own futures. Victor nodded, his approval evident. That's exactly what I hope to hear, Professor. I'm proud of you. You're not just shaping minds, you're changing lives. And that's the true power of teaching. As Emily left the coffee shop, the weight that had settled on her shoulders since her meeting with Victor seemed to lift. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to face the challenges ahead with an open mind. There was still much to learn, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She was excited about it. The path to understanding success had always seemed clear-cut to her, until now. But in embracing the complexity of the journey, Emily had come to realize that success was never meant to be simple. It was a journey that required resilience, vision, and the willingness to fail and learn from those failures. And that was a lesson she couldn't wait to pass on to her students. The end of the semester came quickly, and as Emily prepared for her final lecture, she reflected on how much had changed over the past few months. The students had changed, the Rocket Club had changed, and most significantly, Emily had changed. She had entered the year with a rigid, almost cynical view of success, a belief that only those born into privilege could truly rise to the top. But now, as she looked around her classroom, she saw a group of young minds eager to break through those barriers, eager to prove that success wasn't something reserved for the few. It was something anyone could achieve, regardless of their background. She had spent years telling them that the system was rigged, that the odds were stacked against them. And while there was truth to that, Emily had learned that success was about more than just the system. It was about the people who chose to fight against it, those who persevered through failure, who saw opportunities where others saw walls. It was about believing in one's own potential, even when the world told them they weren't enough. The classroom was full that morning, just as it always was. The familiar faces greeted her with smiles and anticipation. But today, something felt different. There was a new energy in the room, one that was palpable. The students seemed more engaged, more excited about the topic she was about to present. Emily felt that same excitement bubbling inside her, knowing that she was about to share something important with them, something that would change how they saw the world. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady and confident. "Today I'm going to talk about something I've never really addressed in this class before: exceptional minds. You see, I've spent most of my career teaching you that success is often out of your control, that the system favors the privileged and the powerful. And while that's true, there's something I've come to realize over the past few months. There are people, exceptional minds, who break the mold. They don't fit the traditional narrative of success, and they don't let the system define them." The students listened intently, some of them exchanging curious glances. Emily could see that the words were hitting home, but there was still some confusion. This wasn't the message they were used to hearing from her, but it was the truth she now saw clearly. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about people like Elon Musk," Emily continued, her voice softer now. "I used to see him as just another billionaire who got lucky, who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. But what I've learned is that Musk isn't just lucky. He's someone who faced failure, who struggled, who was ridiculed for his ideas, and yet he never gave up. He kept going, and that's what makes him exceptional." A few students nodded, others scribbled notes. Emily could tell they were processing what she was saying. This wasn't the same old lecture on privilege and luck. It was a new perspective, one that acknowledged the hardships, but also celebrated the resilience it took to rise above them. "But it's not just Musk," she continued. "There are countless others out there. People who have faced obstacles that would have stopped most people in their tracks, and yet they continue to push forward. What sets them apart is their mindset, their vision, and their refusal to let failure define them. These are the people who see the world differently, who challenge the status quo, and who create something new. And that's the kind of success I want to teach you about." Emily paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. She could feel the energy shift. Her students were no longer just listening. They were reflecting, thinking, processing. She had given them something to think about, something they could apply to their own lives. "I know many of you feel like success is out of your reach," Emily said, her voice taking on a softer, more personal tone. "I know because I've told you that myself. But what I've learned, and what I hope you'll take away from this class, is that success is about more than just who you know or how much money you have. It's about how you think, how you act, and how you respond when things don't go as planned. It's about believing in your own potential, even when the world tells you to quit. And that, my friends, is something we all have the power to achieve." She paused, looking around at her students, their faces a mix of thoughtfulness and intrigue. This was the moment she had been working toward, the moment where her own beliefs had evolved, and she could pass that evolution on to them. After the class ended, Emily walked to her office, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. The weight of the past few months of introspection seemed to have lifted. For the first time in her career, she felt like she was teaching not just the subject of success, but the real, tangible tools for achieving it. She was no longer just a professor reciting facts and statistics. She was a mentor, helping her students uncover their own potential. As she walked past the engineering building, she spotted Marco and the rest of the Rocket Club gathered outside. They were chatting excitedly, their faces lit up with energy and enthusiasm. Emily couldn't help but smile as she watched them. They had come so far in such a short time, from a small group of students working on rockets in their spare time to a full-fledged club with big plans and even bigger dreams. Their excitement was contagious. "Professor Hawkins," Marco called out as soon as he saw her. "We did it! We're in the competition. We're going to represent the university." Emily's heart swelled with pride. "That's fantastic, Marco. I knew you all had it in you. You've worked so hard for this." Marco's face lit up. "And it's all thanks to you for believing in us. You gave us the space to try, to fail, and to succeed. Without that, we never would have gotten here." Emily's smile deepened. "You all did the work. You had the passion and the drive. I just gave you the opportunity to show what you're capable of." As Marco and the other students continued to talk excitedly about their upcoming competition, Emily realized that this was the true meaning of success, not just in reaching the destination, but in the journey itself. She had helped her students find their own path, their own dreams, and in doing so, she had rediscovered her own. Later that week, she received an email from Victor. The subject line read, "How's everything going, Professor?" She smiled as she opened the message. "Professor Hawkins, I'm glad to see that you're continuing to push forward with your new philosophy on success. I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm confident that you're on the right path. Keep challenging your students. Keep giving them the space to grow. You're doing more than teaching. They'll carry these lessons with them for the rest of their lives." Emily sat back in her chair, rereading the email. She was doing more than teaching. She was helping her students and herself unlock the potential they had always had. And that was the true power of education.